I'm Tom Baker, this is Chasing Cars, and this is the new Hyundai Tucson N Line. If you're a subscriber, you've been putting up with quite a lot of reviews of the new Hyundai Tucson lately, and that's because this midsize SUV now comes in so many different flavors, and most of them weren't actually available to buy when this new model launched earlier in 2021. Well, the full model range is actually now in the country. Hyundai tell us they've got good stock, even of desirable models like this N Line Diesel Elite, which is 47 grand and actually looks like relatively good value on paper. We'll check out that claim in today's video though, when we have a look around the N Line, all the cool stuff you get on this sort of sportier, dressed up version of the Tucson. We'll check out the interior, the back seats and the boot. We'll discuss the running costs of the diesel Tucson, and then we'll head out onto the road to see what this variant of Hyundai SUV is like to drive. But before we get started, make sure to hit subscribe down below. So the N Line variant of the Tucson is pretty different to the standard car, which is a little bit more conservative. So here at the front, we've got a dark chrome finisher rather than the bright color of the garnishing on the regular vehicle. We also get LED headlights, which the standard Elite doesn't get. And given that this is only 2 grand more than a normal version of the Tucson Elite, I think it's kind of a no-brainer with that feature alone. Moving around the side, we get unique 19-inch wheels, very, very intricate sort of lace design there, or snowflake design. Necks and tires, kind of would have expected Hyundai to go for, I don't know, maybe a Continental like they've been doing the last few years. Body colored cladding, so none of that contrast black plastic around here. I think it has the effect of making the Tucson look quite a lot bigger and longer than it does with the body cladding. You can let me know what you think. Moving around here to the back, it's all pretty standard. Again, no cladding, but you will notice the dual tailpipes down here over on the right, which have an exposed finisher that looks pretty good. Now we do get the full length LED light bar here on the N Line. That looks really cool. Still no power tailgate though, even with this package. Like the standard Elite, it's just manual. Thankfully, it's really assisted by the gas struts. And we have a 539 litre boot. 3 suitcases get in here just fine. Then underneath the boot floor, we have a full-size spare, which is definitely handy. But you'll need to step up to the 53 grand Tucson Highlander N Line diesel if you want this package and this engine with something like a power tailgate. Jumping inside the Tucson N Line, we see more of the unique features that this package adds to the already pretty impressive interior of the new Tucson. So for starters, you see red highlights everywhere. So the stitching in this steering wheel turns red, and all the chrome trim is darkened to black or almost black, including here on the steering wheel, which also has an N badge proudly emblazoned on it. Otherwise, it's the same wheel as the regular Tucson, just with these dark colored paddle shifters behind it and perforations around the edge. So all that adds up to feel pretty good in the hand. Now we also have red detailing up here on the sort of cloth inserts in the dash, and we've got red runners all the way along the edge of these seats. Now the seats themselves are basically the same seat as the regular Tucson, but the trim changes to a mix of synthetic leather and Alcantara in the center. Looks good, feels good. We've also got seat heating here on the Elite for those colder days during winter. Now the infotainment package is actually upgraded in the N Line, which is quite interesting. Here in the center, you get a 10.25 inch screen. You always did get that on the Elite. The N Line upgrades it to 10.25 inches on the base model though, but you also get the digital instrument cluster, which looks great. It looks a lot better than the standard kind of basic analog instruments on the regular Tucson. It's just that you don't get the blind spot cameras that this screen usually adds in other Hyundais. That's still a feature reserved for the top spec Highlander and Highlander N Line. Now what else have we got in here? We've got wireless charging down here for smartphones, big cup holders, push button gearbox. Takes a little bit of getting used to, but it does free up a fair amount of space. Big box between the seats, bottle holders in the doors, and the view out is good. You sit pretty high in this car. We do have electric adjustment on the driver's seat, but you basically can see out really well with big mirrors and a clear view out behind you as well. If you've watched my other Tucson reviews, you'll have already heard me rattle on about the fact Hyundai Australia opted for the long wheelbase version of the new Tucson this time around, and that's created a huge amount of space here in the back, easily on a par with the Santa Fe, but remembering this is a 5-seat SUV rather than a 7-seater. Legroom, fantastic for myself at 6 foot. Headroom's really good, and toe room is awesome too, particularly because you've just got so much space to put your feet. You could get someone in the middle. There's a little hump in the floor, but nothing major. But we also get air vents as standard across the range. We get 2 more USB ports, map pockets in the backs of the front seats, although your sill up here does go hard on all grades of the Tucson. But we get a flip down armrest, 2 cup holders there, and just like up front, the seats have this more interesting mix of materials on the N line that looks pretty good. That being said, you also get a black headliner, and so the whole interior does feel a fair bit darker than the regular Tucson, which has a light headliner and is also available with light colored seats as an option. So what's it going to cost you to run a Tucson diesel? Well, the diesel has the lowest running costs of any of the Tucsons, mainly because its fuel consumption is by far the lowest. We manage 7 litres per 100 Ks combined. You'll be able to match that pretty easily and do better on the highway as well. Servicing, that's done every 12 months or 15,000 Ks, not 10,000 Ks like in the turbo petrol version of this car. And the first 5 services will set you back $1,875 if you buy them up front as a pack. That's basically how you lock in today's cap price servicing costs on a Hyundai. Warranty on the car, 5 years with unlimited kilometers. And in terms of insurance, in the last 12 months, the median budget direct customer spent $861 to comprehensively insure a new Hyundai Tucson. Everybody's situation varies, and your premium will vary based on things insurers take into account, like where you live, your driving history, how you garage the car, etc. Well, another day, another Hyundai Tucson. That's kind of how it feels at the moment with the reviews we've been running. So if you're a subscriber, thanks for your patience, I guess. But in all seriousness, I think Hyundai probably realized they were onto a good thing with the new NX4 Tucson, which is why they decided to bring so many different variants of this car to Australia. And really all of the variants have different appeal to different people. The range starts quite affordably, for instance, and the base model, as we found a few months ago, definitely has its strong points, though the engine and the gearbox aren't really one of them. And it's really at this kind of mid-spec level, elite, diesel, and then maybe the turbo petrol to some extent. That's where the goodness starts to come on song with the Tucson. Now the N Line package has definitely been hotly awaited. This was a similar specification to the one that I did a preview drive of before the Tucson launched, and the N Line package looked pretty good on the Amazon green. Now here on this white N Line, it really does have that sort of stormtrooper aesthetic, kind of similar to a Volkswagen Tiguan R line, which is definitely a compliment to the Tucson. And at 47 grand, the pricing of this particular car is really interesting because it gets in under that 50 grand level. It's got the good engine, and while the Elite felt a little bit Spartan when we drove it a few weeks ago, with the N Line Fruit tacked on for like 2 grand more, it definitely feels like a more special and sophisticated car. So that option's a no-brainer in my mind. But first of all, let's just remind ourselves of the basic mechanical package here. So this car's fitted with the 2-litre turbo diesel 4-cylinder engine, making 136 kilowatts of power and 416 newton meters of torque, making it both the most powerful and the torquiest engine in the Tucson lineup. And in particular, on the torque front, it's got like 150 newton meters more than the next best, which is the 1.6 turbo petrol. And the torque really defines the experience in the diesel Tucson. It's just effortless. Whether you're in the burbs like I am now, or you're on the highway, or you're further afield in the country, all of this shove just comes on in a really nice linear fashion and just pulls you towards the horizon. It's not, downright quick off the line, but in that classic 4-cylinder way, it just pulls and pulls, and it's really satisfying to drive in that sense, particularly if you do longer miles and you're going to take advantage of how easy this car makes it to overtake trucks on the highway and whatnot. The automatic transmission is an 8-speed torque converter. It's easily the best of the autos available in the Tucson. The 6-speed torque converter with the base 2-litre non-turbo engine chases high gears way too much when the engine has insufficient torque, so it's always hunting around. And the 7-speed dry dual clutch auto in the 1.6 turbo is okay, but it just still exhibits some of those weird DCT characteristics It can be a little bit laggy, it over revs. It hasn't kind of kept pace with newer dual clutch autos, including Hyundai's own wet clutch version, which you get in the i30N DCT and the Sonata N Line and the Santa Fe diesel. So this auto is actually really great. But we already knew that from reviewing the standard Tucson Elite diesel. I still think that the regular Highlander diesel could be the absolute sweet spot, but for people wanting the sporty appearance package of the N Line and this sporty interior with the cool seats, the red stitching on the steering wheel, you know, I totally get it. It's cool. And the great point is that while the N Line has 19-inch wheels, like the Highlander does, and relatively low profile tires for a Tucson, the ride just doesn't suffer. The Tucson's ride has actually been calibrated extremely well in new generation form. It has a perfect or near perfect combination of firmness and compliance. So there is road feel, you do know what's going on underneath the car, but it's simply never allowed to crash into the cabin and cause discomfort. I reckon Hyundai have pretty much nailed the ride of this car, and in some ways, the bigger you go on the wheel front, the more of that sort of subtle road feel you get through, and it also turns in really well, but you don't get a diminished ride. Normally with midsize SUVs, we find that on 18-inch, 19-inch, even 20-inch wheels on some rivals, the ride gets choppy very quickly. That isn't the case with the Tucson, so the N Line is still a really comfortable car, and that's great because you get to have the best looking Tucson with the body kit, with the big wheels, all that stuff, but the ride doesn't suffer. One of the reasons the ride doesn't suffer though is that the N Line doesn't get its own suspension tune. So it just has the same suspension tune as, say, the ordinary Highlander, like the luxury spec Highlander, which also has 19s. And so it doesn't have any kind of suspension that's specifically designed to be stiff or sporty or athletic or any of that sort of thing that you might want on a Toyota 86 or a Golf GTI, but you don't want on a family SUV. You really don't. Like on a car like this, a sports suspension rarely makes the car better to drive on average. It might make it slightly better in terms of on-limit handling, but how often in a bus like this are you driving on the limit? I'd wager almost never. Maybe in that one-off situation where you're on a family holiday in regional Australia and the kids are still sleeping and you take the car out and you have a blat on a country road, like in a TV ad or something. That really doesn't happen often enough to justify an SUV that doesn't ride well. And that's why I think Hyundai actually made the right decision with the N Line. It still has the regular, comfortable Tucson suspension, but it just looks cooler outside. Best of both worlds. Cool look, but not a shitty ride. There you go. Another thing Hyundai did well in the new Tucson is refinement. It's a quieter car than the generation it replaced. Everything feels really good. You sit comfortably. The view out is excellent. The mirrors are big. So it actually does have that sense of refinement imbued into it. The power plant isn't particularly vibey. I mean, it's a 4-cylinder diesel, but you can live with it. Turn up the stereo, you don't hear it at all. Now, we don't get the premium audio of the Highlander, which is a bit of a disappointment because the standard stereo doesn't sound all that great. Another reason why I think that Highlander could be very much the way to go at the top of the range, but it starts getting pretty expensive as a Highlander diesel N Line. And then on the safety front, it's pretty good really. Hyundai's lane keep assist is one of the best tuned on the market. We find it doesn't pogo between the sides of the lane on the highway. It really does find the center and it sticks to it. We've got forwards AEB, we don't have reversing AEB, which is disappointing when every spec of the Mazda CX-5 has that potentially life-saving feature fitted as standard. But we have adaptive cruise control, we've got blind spot monitoring. Again though, we just have the old school blind spot monitoring in the mirrors where you get a little amber light and it can beep at you. The Tucson Highlander gets the blind spot cameras, which are much better. A, they catch your attention better. B, they actually show you a crisp live feed from your blind spot of what's actually happening, rather than just a little amber light saying there might be something there. Actually seeing it without having to turn your head is even better. So yeah, while the Elite is pretty well kitted out on that front, the Highlander takes it even further. So those are my opinions of the Tucson N Line, seen here in Elite diesel form. To be honest, the N Line package makes a lot of sense on the Tucson if what you're after is a more sporty look outside and an interior that feels a little bit more special with those sort of Alcantara seats and red detailing. On the base models in particular, it's an easy and cheap way to really upgrade the perceived quality of the Tucson, although at the top of the range, I think it's more of your choice whether you want a more luxury spec in, say, the Highlander or the N Line for that sporty look. Of course, I'm always keen to know your thoughts. You can let me know down below this video. Have you ordered a Tucson N Line? Are you in one now? What do you think of it? While you're there, make sure to hit subscribe and the notification bell. And as always, thanks for watching Chasing Cars.